Thank you for the question. I would like all the members of the committee to look at the very bottom of the Department of Community Affairs expense form, and I'm going to read it. And this is what the person, both Ms. Potts and Mayor Fretti, this is what they're certifying to when they sign this. I do solemnly swear under criminal penalty of a felony for false statements, which goes to what the code section I just put up there. Penalty of false statements subject to punishment by not less than 1 year or more than 20 years or penal servitude, that the above statements are true, and I have incurred the above described expenses and the state use, mileage, and discharge of my official duties of the state. So to answer your question, one time might be a mistake, but realistically, how many reasonable people are going to sign something that is under penalty of felony if it's wrong? It's like, in other words, when Mayor Fretti or any other board member signs this, they are swearing under oath that this is correct. So how many times could it be a mistake, especially when Mayor Fretti is coming right back to Valdosta and submitting an expense sheet to the city?
Right, let's use this scenario. You know it's not, but let's just say those 7 on that side you don't know about. If you were to look at just those 2, could you say it would be could have been a mistake?
I think one could be. Now let me say this. I think one could be if it was one where Ms. Ponce filled it in and maybe Mayor Fretti just signed it. But when he puts it in his own hand, I would say the threshold would be none. I mean, if Mayor Fretti is putting it in his own hand, the mileage, and he's coming back to Valdosta and submitting an expense sheet for the exact same expense, I would say the tolerance would be 0. I would say a reasonable person would say, if someone else is filling it out, here in response, and then submitting it to him for approval, sure. 1, maybe 2, might be a threshold, but when he's putting it in his own hand, the threshold is 0.
Right. When you say in his own hand, you're not going by the color of ink, you're going by, you know it's his handwriting.
Well, sir, to be fair, I'm going by the color of ink and also going by looking at all of the different ones that it could have been anybody but his. But to answer your question, have I had a handwriting expert look at it? No. No, sir. Extremely strong circumstantial evidence.
Anybody question this response is G.B.R. The reason I ask that, this is a general statement. The standard practice for approval of per diem and travel expenses for members of the Board of Community Affairs is as follows. That's what she stated.
Mr. Talley, I will tell you on the record that I have questioned her and she agreed with me that it appeared that Mayor Fretti had filled out his own hand. However, this tribunal, lacking the subpoena power and the Attorney General's office and also the management there, Department of Community Affairs, being very reluctant to let her sign anything in absence of a compulsory legal process, that's all they would let her sign, to answer your question. I would love to have had a more in-depth affidavit, but without the threat of a subpoena from this tribunal, that's as good as I can. And very briefly, Code Section 16-10-20, which basically is very similar to the code section I've already referenced. If a government official makes a false statement, it is a felony. So we have, members of the committee, 2 different code sections that make it a false statement. Make it a felony for a government official. Here again, this particular part of the Georgia Criminal Code only applies to government officials, both state and local. There is definitely evidence to go forward on whether a crime has been committed. And I might add, and this is probably a good time to discuss this, and I'm sure that the committee members are aware, we're not deciding guilt or innocence today. The charge of this committee is to determine whether there are sufficient facts and circumstances to proceed forward with the appointment of the Board of Ethics. And I think there is, at this point, overwhelming evidence to overcome sufficient facts and circumstances for there to be an ethics board appointed to view whether or not these particular criminal statutes have been violated. And finally, the final provision of the Code of Ethics is seminar, convention, or conference without refunding any unused travel expense money to the city. To the city. And there's a committee, and I appreciate the question earlier, because that's exactly where I was going with it. On the per diem, I think it would have been absolutely appropriate for the mayor to submit his meals and hotel expenses to the city minus $105. And also goes back to what I referenced earlier. The mileage should have been paid back to the city, not to the Department of Community Affairs. That conduct clearly violates Code of Ethics 3B9, because these are essentially unused funds. Because he was receiving compensation from the Department of Community Affairs for a Department of Community Affairs board meeting. This money should have been paid back to the city, not the Department of Community Affairs. As the mileage was paid back to the Department of Community Affairs, it should have been paid back to the city. And presently, the mayor should have to pay back the $105 per diem he received every time that he submitted an expense sheet for travel, for hotel and meals. Every time that was submitted to the city council, he should have to pay that back to the city. Because that is essentially, to quote this particular provision, this is an unused travel expense. Because that's...
You don't think this section contemplates a situation where a member of council says, I'm going to GMA, I anticipate that I'm going to spend $500, I want to get $500 to take with me this amount, then he comes back and files the expense sheet and says, I spent $496, get the $4.
Mr. Hatter, I certainly think it could apply in that situation, but I also think it would apply in a situation where the mayor receives 100% compensation for his actual expenses from the city, and then from another government agency receiving $105 per diem. When he's going on business at the other governmental agency, the $105 constitutes an unused travel expense that ought to be refunded to the taxpayers of the city of Valdosta.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. In your opinion, why did the mayor pay back the money? Whether he paid back to us or DCA, why did he pay the money back?
In my opinion, there was someone submitting an open records request in July 2010, quote unquote, snooping around travel expenses, and at that point in time, he realized that there was somebody was going to engage in some oversight of the double mileage, and I think he paid it back to the DCA because it would not cause as much attention as it would have been if he paid it back to the city of Valdosta. But to be fair, that's speculation. And once again, my client and I are a little hamstrung because this committee doesn't have subpoena power. I can't go out and subpoena witnesses and take depositions like we can in a civil case, as y'all know. So I got one hand tied behind my back without a subpoena power. But certainly the circumstances would strongly suggest that it was the open records request in the summer of 2010 that led to the payback to the wrong governmental agency. It should have been paid to the city of Valdosta.
Okay, and then my second question deals with our ethics code and number 6. I believe you have something up there. Engage in any activity or transaction that is prohibited by law. And I'm stopping there because I want you to tell me how you interpret that law versus ethics.
Well, sir, I think that it's emerging. I think what the ethics code is saying, of course, when you bring up a good point, there may be a lot of conduct that's unethical that may not be illegal. And I think that is addressed. There are a lot of things that the ethics code prohibits, which are not technically illegal. But one particular section of the ethics code says, and I'm interpreting, that sure, there are a lot of things that are unethical, that are not illegal, and we don't want you to do them. But certainly if it rises to the level of criminal conduct, that's going to violate the ethics code too. So the ethics code is a big circle. The criminal conduct is a little circle inside that big circle. And that's where the false statements, which, you know, if you look at the bottom of the Department of Community Affairs, it's right there on there, it's under penalty. That's where the false statements come in as it applies to a government official knowingly making a false statement. Is prohibited not only by criminal law, the small circle, but also
this ethics code that they start.
Any other questions? And I'm going to conclude, and once again, I apologize for maybe taking a little longer than I intended, but I do appreciate this committee holding this hearing. I appreciate the city council appointing this committee. And I'd just like to say that not as a representative of a client, but just as a citizen of the city of Valdosta, that if you go out, and I know y'all know this, in this country, the public's confidence in government is at an all-time low. I'm telling you something you already know. I will tell you that it's particularly true in the city of Valdosta. There's been so much in the newspaper over the last year. Our public's confidence in government is at here, our local government is at an all-time low. This committee has a chance to turn that around. This committee has a chance to say that no government official, from the mayor of Valdosta on down, no government official is above the law. We all have to follow the rules. And I think this committee can take a big step in restoring confidence in government in the city of Valdosta.